Hey, hello and welcome everyone. Welcome to my channel, Hogarth's Global Astrology, Know Your Nation, Know Yourself. And welcome to the second part in my What Makes a Great Singer series. For those that may have seen already, the first installment was the great Celine Dion. And the second installment today is Whitney Houston. Now, listen. Whitney's special, yeah. I mean, look, we know the story, we know what happened, and we will go there. Trust me, we will really go there. But as we know, and as you would have seen from the introductory clip, Whitney Houston was one of the best singers that's ever lived. The power and the range of her voice, of course, and the beauty was just absolutely stunning. So for this, because it's Whitney, may she rest in peace, I have dressed up for this. I've just brought out the flamboyant shirts, and as you know, normally I sip some water or some kind of juice, but as this is Whitney, and Whitney's so hardcore and so deep is her story, this one it had to start with a cocktail. So I've literally got this being shaken up right now. And this is going to go into this, whoops, glass already pre-chilled, because there are certain legends where fruit juice is not enough. So getting deep, folks, going in there, and this one, I need to test this out anyway. That's what I'm talking about. Negroni. So listen, you may not have seen that before, but we're going to get deep here. So let's get stuck in. So just to recap what we covered with Celine. We looked at what makes a great singer. You need the second house, you need the third house, you need the fifth house, you need the ninth house, and you need the 10th house for those really, truly global proportions. But particularly, we're looking at the second house for that great talent. Oh my God, this is good, by the way. Rest in peace, Whitney. This is for you. So here on this one, the tone of this is going to be a little bit different, because as we know, sadly, Whitney didn't make it. But we know she was a tremendous talent, had an incredible gift, was a pioneer, and broke so many barriers, helped and inspired so many singers. I mean, there's virtually, it's hard to believe, a popular contemporary singer today with any kind of, vaguely pop or R&B or whatever kind of sound that has not been influenced by Whitney Houston. I mean, of course, time is moving on. There will be generations that might be less familiar with her, but everyone still knows who she is, and posthumously, her music is still played. We all know the hits, and we all know that fantastic voice. So let's get stuck into the chart, where we're going to look at Whitney's gifts, but then we're also going to look at some of those challenges, because obviously she's not going to have the same chart as Celine, and she's not going to have the same chart as Mariah, because if she did, she would probably still be here today. And she's not here today, but her music lives on. But I also want to illustrate, to show you this astrology stuff is real. And when I go through and when I explain, as I've done in my previous videos, then you will see why things tend to pan out as they do. We can all have the ability to transcend our charts. We don't always have to live 100% of our charts. Some things are avoidable, but we all have challenges, and it takes our personal will to overcome those challenges. If our will is compromised, then we can succumb. But anyway, moving on. So let's get stuck in. Now, here you are. You can see the this is a chart. I've got a little breeze going on here, you know. Maybe I'm just channeling a bit of energy there, because there would always be a little bit of sweat on Whitney's brow, wouldn't they? So I have had to have the fan on for this one, just so I can stay cool. So like with Celine and like what I'll do with Mariah, we've got the charts. And then for just to start off with Whitney Houston, she is an Aquarius ascendant. So she actually has the same ascendant as Mariah Carey. Celine Dion actually has a Gemini ascendant. So all of these women are in air. And that is very significant because air is about communication. As you can see, the breeze ruffling the paper. It's also about the voice as well. So having an air ascendant as a singer clearly is an advantage, because it gives one a desire to communicate. Air is very creative, but essentially it is that sign of communication and socialization and interaction. So of course, what is singing all about? We can't sing without air. So, you know, I'll see in future charts when I explore this theme further to see if that air element keeps repeating, but it wouldn't surprise me if it did. Another sip. Oh my God, I'm so gonna neck this once this is finished. Anyway, so Aquarius. So remember before, as with Celine, the most important thing that we're looking at is the second house. So with Whitney Houston, so this is the first house, and looky here what we have in the second house. Boom! Moon and Jupiter again. Now with Celine, we could see how that was very significant. She had it in her third house, but with Bava Chilita, it was, the moon was technically in her second house, so she still got that tick there. Here we can see it clearly in Whitney Houston's second house. Now it's in the sign of Pisces. Pisces is a water sign. It's a feminine sign, but also as well, it's extremely expansive. It's very, very broad. It's extremely spiritual, and it is ruled in old money by who? Planet Jupiter. Planet Jupiter is the natural Lord of the 12th house, in the sense of in the natural order of the zodiac. Pisces is the last sign, the 12th sign, and this is ruled by Jupiter. So this Jupiter here is extremely powerful because Jupiter is in its own sign. Now, whenever a planet is in its own sign, it's almost as if it's exalted. An exalted planet is just off the charts, and there's a very good example with that with Mariah Carey, and we'll find out in the next video what that is. But this is basically, you know, pretty much just as good. Not only that, but Jupiter is with his friend Moon, and we see when Jupiter and Moon are together, you know, they make a wonderful combination. And here Whitney Houston has got them, not only Jupiter in its own sign. Moon loves being in the sign of its friends. It's in the water sign of Pisces, so that adds tremendous emotive and spiritual power to the moon. The moon is a very spiritual planet anyway, but when it's in a water sign, it is kind of amped up, and when it's in Pisces, it becomes oceanic. And as we've noticed with Whitney's voice at its prime, it had this oceanic, epic sound, tremendous power. I think even Mariah Carey said she felt intimidated about meeting Whitney Houston at first. Even though they got along, there was no feud, they got along because she knew of the sheer power of Whitney's voice. Everyone knows that. You know, Whitney and Celine are the main power ones, but there was this, to the timbre, as they would say, to Whitney's voice, that had this almost tenor-like quality. Particularly the upper chest belt was just off the charts, and she could basically, you know, break, you know, brick walls with that voice. But then there was also as well that soft, velvety, moonlight quality to Whitney's voice as well, with this gentle beauty and sophistication. And she could do it all. She had that flexibility, that melisma. So her power notes were impressive, but so were her gentle, soft, floaty notes, which of course, you know, made her love songs, you know, second to none. You know, we all know I Will Always Love You. And I'm going to look through and decide, you know, what song I'm going to play out for the ending. But obviously that would be an obvious candidate, because that was her breakout hit. And this is very much to do here with, you know, Moon and Jupiter in the second house. So also as well, the second house is also it's also a family house. It's a house of family, upbringing and values. So surprise, surprise, what do we see here? Jupiter is the planet of hope and spirituality. The moon is very spiritual, and they're all in Pisces, which is a spiritual sign. The moon is also the mother. And what do we know? Of course, Whitney's mother, Sissy, sung very much in the church. Whitney sang in the church. That's really where she kind of cut her teeth as a performer. Her mother-in-law was Dionne Warwick, you know, and also as well, I think Shaka Khan might be involved in there as well. But you can see here very powerful female voices, quite literally. You can see that kind of lineage that Whitney had in terms of that pedigree, in terms of being able to sing. It was a gift, a God-given gift, as we all know. You don't need me to tell you that, but when you actually see Jupiter, which is the spirit, you know, the guru anyway, with Moon, basically that is Jupiter. That's like the priest and the queen making love, basically, in that house, making sweet music. And she was just very gifted. It was very talented. And when you have benefics, particularly in the second house, benefics, they're very generous. They like to give. So her talent was just epic. And of course, with I think was it Clive Davis or Miles Davis, something Davis. I'll research that and I'll correct myself with a little bit of writing. Of course, the second that he heard Whitney Houston, the second anyone heard her voice, you could hear that talent and that soulfulness, even from when she was a young girl. I think there's some footage of when she was like 14. I'll see if I can find it.
Her first solo was terrific, but she tore the church up. Anyone raves, certain notes that she had just sent chills through my body. And it was effortless, you know, without all the movements and, you know, not too much drama. She was able to just stand flat foot and sing. The timbre and the fervor of her voice was something like I'd never heard before. We were kind of used to good singing, like Whitney being so young with such a big, powerful voice, such a focused voice. That's really what made it awesome.
From that young age, the power and the range and the spectacular beauty of the voice was already apparent, you know. So there you go, just amazing. So that's the second house. So she gets a tick. Now we see here, you might not be able to see these ticks, but things get a little bit more complicated as we go along. Another slurp. Oh. Honestly, I can recommend that. It's Negroni is a classic. So we come to a tricky house. Now the third house is a tricky house anyway. However, we do need it as identified for performing. Now, if we were to reimagine Celine's chart, if we looked at the Leo part of her chart, her third house, because she was a Gemini ascendant, 1, 2, 3, she had Jupiter and Moon in there in the third house. Outstanding performer. The third house again is the house of courage. Actually, in Celine's tour is called what? Courage. But it's the house of performing. It's the house of self-efforts. It's the house of desires. It's the house of practical skills and knowledge to exchange and share with others. Can also represent the voice, but more in the sense of communicating. It's more closely associated with writing as well, but particularly with performing on the stage and having great endurance and stamina. Planets that are in the third house have to develop stamina because the third house makes you work and graft quite a lot. But if we see here, Whitney's third house, 1, 2, 3, is empty. Now, as I said before, it doesn't mean that that house is not active. It just means that there's not as much emphasis. And to get a little bit more insight into the strength of that house, you need to look at the house lord. Now, for Whitney Houston, the house lord is Mars. Yeah? Because Mars rules Aries and it rules Scorpio. Now, for an Aquarius ascendant, Mars rules the third house, which is a tricky house, but it rules an angle, which is the 10th, one of the most powerful angles. And Mars loves being in the 10th house, but you can see it's not there. Her Mars is where? It's in the 8th house. This is tricky. Now, the 8th house is it has a lot of good sides to it, but it's almost always a challenge. Yeah. What is the 8th house? The 8th house on its good side is transformation. It's Kundalini energy. It's the sexual energy. It is also the house of vulnerability that we share with our partner. You know, the 7th house is about the getting together. The 8th house is like the shared bank account. You could put it that way because it's also associated with money, but particularly with the money of others. And it's all the different ologies. You know, if you think of graphology, astrology, numerology, you know, things like aromatherapy, meditation, transcending, you know, it's all of those things. So it has those qualities. Those are the positive qualities of the 8th house. But it does have its negatives as well. And anyone with the planets in the 8th house will know that it's challenging. The 8th house is a Dusthana house, which means it's a difficult house. The 3rd house is a Dusthana house, but it's also an Upachaya. And Upachaya means it improves with time. With Dusthanas, they're more challenging. And the 8th house is the most challenging house of all the houses. We'll go into that detail once I actually get round further. So by Mars being in the 8th, although in the natural zodiac it rules the 8th house because the 8th sign is Scorpio, when you've got a malefic in the 8th, this is very challenging, particularly Mars, because then we're looking at, you know, things like addictions and scandals and all those kind of sudden shocks and surprises, yeah, and those sketchy parts of life. So her 3rd and 10th lord are weakened. So in many ways, one could argue that's maybe why there wasn't quite as much follow through ultimately in the end with Whitney's career. And of course, as we know what happened because of various different things, what happened? Her touring, her performing was interrupted, wasn't it? She didn't, obviously she reached, you know, full bloom, and she, you know, became you know, a queen of voice. No one would ever take that away from Whitney, but her legacy was shortened. She ran out. She kind of ran out of puff, didn't she? Bless her, because, you know, that her 10th lord, her career house, her career lord, Mars, by ruling the 10th and the 3rd, wasn't really able to support her so much. And we'll go more into those kind of depths. So, you know, when we consider the 3rd house is performing, you know, it was a bit challenging for her. But let's move on to the 5th. So here we've got Rahu in here. And what are my notes? I put Fifth house, strong with Rahu in Purnavasu in the sign of Gemini, adding to Whitney's vocal talent by enabling rapid phrasing and agility. This also added to her mothering qualities. Right, so Gemini. What's Gemini all about? Communication, fun, laughter, spreading information, networking, partying. Yeah, partying. The fifth house is also the house of, not only the house of creativity, as I've said in other videos, it also represents children, but it also represents good counsel. It also represents advice, mantras, speculation, gambling, fun. It's also a party house. Rahu is the headless part of the dragon, which is, and it's a point of fate and destiny, the direction we're supposed to go in life. But it's also, because it's the head of the dragon, but not the body, wherever Rahu is, we have a certain insatiable appetite for that part of life. Because you can imagine, if you're mortal and you're eating, but you've got no body, the food keeps falling through. So Rahu represents our obsessions, the things that we can't get enough of. It's also in the sign of Purnavasu, which is a very wealthy, rich nakshatra. The deity of it is the mother of the gods, but it's also as well, it's about repetition and doing things over. So you have Rahu working with the energy of doing things over, not being able to quite get enough. So there was this element of Whitney Houston that couldn't get enough partying, having fun. And as we know, when we're at parties and stuff, what happens? We have our little drinks, don't we? Our little drinky poos. And for the case of Whitney Houston, of course, it was more than that. Not everyone is like that, of course, and we're all entitled to have fun and have a party. But when you've got Rahu in the fifth, and you've got this kind of a bit of a sketchy eighth house going on, which deals with addictions, and there's another house I'll talk about as well, we can see when we join the dots on that, that's not the best combination, is it? Really? However, Rahu does expand things. He blows things up. He's very intelligent. He can give great talent as well. And we can see sensational talent, vocal ability, of course, that Whitney had because of course the fifth house is also the house of intelligence and talent as well. Extremely talented. And Gemini is quick moving, so she had that very fast melisma and the way and the phrasing and the agility of the voice as well. She could do anything with her voice as well. So Rahu very much gave that talent as well, but it also gave a certain insatiable appetite for things that maybe weren't in Whitney Houston's best interest. And also as well, one of the elements of Purnavasu as well, sometimes we may not learn from our mistakes, so we have to repeat them and repeat them and repeat them. So if we see this, when we think about Whitney's life, you know, it starts to make a bit of sense, doesn't it? But anyway, fabulous fifth house, very strong. Now what I've done here is I've added the seventh house here. Now why have I done that? The seventh house also deals with the public. Yeah, so of course, you know, if you're a world-renowned singer, you know, you're going to be known by the public. So what I've put here, seventh house, strong, Marga and Purva Falguni is in there. Uranus in Marga creates a rebel queen. So if we look here, we've got planet Uranus, we've got Mercury, the planet of communication, and we've got Pluto in the seventh house. Now, the seventh house is also spouses and adversaries as well. Pardon me. And that's going to become very relevant when I talk a little bit about Bobby Brown. Right. So, planet Uranus in Marga. Marga is the first section of Leo. Yeah, so it goes, it's from 0 degrees to 13 minutes 20, 0 degrees to 13 degrees 20 minutes of Leo. So it's all contained within Leo, and it's the first part. Magha is that leadership quality of Leo. It's that part where we get on the throne, where we put on the throne by the ancestors to fulfill certain deeds on their behalf, but also as well it creates great leadership. So there's no doubt, of course, that, as I said before, Whitney was a queen in her own right in terms of vocals. You know, in the 80s and the 90s, as we know, there was no one that was touching even close to Whitney. Maybe, you know, of course, Shaka Khan, but it wasn't really until Mariah rocked up. That's when people started looking at alternatives, because she just ruled on that. So that was her gift. But look, it's planet Uranus. Uranus is the rebel planet, and it's also the planet of innovation. As I've said in previous videos before, it's like the Brexit planet, yeah? So wherever you see planet Uranus, there's some unique kind of talent or rebellion or something that has to be expressed. That's your individual truth, yeah? So with planet Uranus being there, we can see there was this radical side to Whitney. There was this rebel side to Whitney. And in fact, when you watch the documentaries, her nearest and dearest actually say this, that she had this kind of radical side that many people weren't aware of with her. But it was definitely there. And also as well, let's think of the innovation. In terms of the public, she made a lot of breakthroughs, particularly for, you know, black artists and BAME artists, people of color, crossing over into that pop mainstream. That wasn't really that big a thing in the 80s. Whitney completely shattered that mold and laid the foundations for everyone to come. I mean, of course, you know, one can argue as well, you know, Diana Ross, Aretha Franklin, of course, these are masters, they are greats in their own right. But in terms of that crossing over as a black artist, crossing over into that big time mainstream consciousness in that kind of Jupiterian sense, which is about huge expansion, you know, Whitney really did a lot there. And she actually even got quite a lot of criticism, actually. Some people thought she was too pop, because, you know, that was a new thing. You know, there was disco, but, you know, Whitney for majority of her career, obviously it went more R&B as she went on, but in the beginning she was very much pop. So but we also see planet Pluto there, which intensifies things. But you have the Mercury in Purva Falguni. This is the classic places for performers. But not only that, Mercury is known as the actor of the zodiac. He's mutable. He can take on the characteristics and the flavors of other planets. And what's one of the things as well that Whitney Houston was known for? She was a brilliant actress as well. She couldn't only sing, she not only sang, she also acted beautifully as well. And she was well known in the public eye for this. And let's also not forget, with that film, Bodyguard, Kevin Costner, with that famous soundtrack, that song was #1 for ages and ages and ages. Now, it wasn't, everyone thinks it's Whitney's song. It wasn't. That song actually belongs to Dolly Parton. Oh, maybe I should do a video on her, actually. That song belongs to Dolly Parton. Dolly Parton doesn't mind, because she said, you know, Whitney made it her own, and she was like, I get the paycheck. You know, that's typical Dolly fashion. But of course, when we think of the seventh house also represents the public overseas, but it can also represent the partner as well. And we'll get back onto that when we talk about Whitney's 8th house. So there we see that great talent. It's in Leo. So again, those Leo qualities. You almost always need Leo for this kind of performing, leading, shining, being a star in some shape or form, because Leo, the sun rules Leo. Sun and moon only have one sign each, but that's all they need. So sun is Leo and is the king, moon is Cancer and is the queen. So you're always looking for that male or female, it doesn't matter, because, you know, whatever, gender is just that. What we're looking at is the energy. So you can see she had a lot of this sun energy in the 7th house. But what this can also mean as well, this also reflects on the partner. So let's talk a little bit about Bobby Brown. Now, I'm not going to go into details because I'm not going to do his chart. And in many ways, you know, we're talking about great singers here. You know, fair dues to him. You know, his career was all right, but it wasn't on that Whitney level. So, but however, her 7th house does reveal elements of the partner and what she's attracted to. So we can see here, what do we see? A rebel. Bobby Brown was a rebel and a very good communicator. He sang as well, but Mercury is speech, but it's also speed. What was he also familiar with? With his rapping as well. He mixed in his singing and his rapping together. But looky here, we also see Pluto. And here, if we look at Mercury, although it's in Purva Falguni, it's at 16 degrees 54 minutes. Pluto is at 17 degrees 40 minutes. So that means basically they're conjunct. They're exactly conjunct. You know, there's it's just slightly, yeah, it's just pretty much a degree in it. So that adds a lot of darkness and a lot of intensity to that 7th house, but also to that Mercury as well. And so we can see, you know, in terms of, you know, Bobby Brown and all that kind of stuff, he was very much part of Whitney's social circle. They obviously had a lot, but in common, and that rapport, but we can see there was something else going on, because Pluto is very intense and Pluto is very much about the underworld. Yeah, so there's a tick for the 7th house, but you know, it came with baggage. If we go to the 10th, we see here it's empty. It does enjoy an aspect from Jupiter, so Jupiter was able to cast a blessing on Whitney Houston's career, quite rightly so. But it's only Jupiter that is giving that aspect. The 10th Lord is still weak. So let's really go in now to this 8th house, where I've put 2 crosses on there. And this is where we get a little bit deeper into Whitney's chart. Let me just get up my laptop because I just wanted to double check. Let me just double check the degrees of her planets. Forgive me, I should have done this before. I just want to see what the Dharaka is, so we can see what potentially Whitney was attracted to as I examine that 7th house. So let's get Whitney's chart up. Got Mariah at the moment. Whitney Houston. And let's see here. Sorry, I'm just doing this off camera. This is where my computer software. Now let's see what the planet. Aha! Just as I thought. Right, this is going to be a deep slurp. Okay, just as I thought. In my Celine video, I talked about the Dharaka, didn't I? The planet that holds the lowest degree. Also represents the spouse and what we're attracted to. The planet with the highest degree represents the soul. Planet with the second highest degree represents the career. When we look for Whitney, we see here that her Atmakarka, her soul planet, which is actually the same as mine, is Saturn. But that does add a lot of, it does create a very soft soul, and it creates a humanitarian. And we know that Whitney cared a lot about people, and she was a very motherly influence in the music industry, particularly for artists and acts coming up. She was very generous in that way. The planet with the second highest degree for Whitney is Jupiter. Boom. So there we can see career planet in the second house. That was the source of earnings and wealth. Yeah. And Jupiter rules the 11th house of great gains, and of course the second house as well. So for an Aquarius ascendant, Jupiter really is basically a massive money earner. Jupiter is very, very good for Aquarius ascendant. However, Mars holds the lowest degree. Yeah? Where is Mars? So we know Mars is the ruler of the 10th and the 3rd house for Aquarius ascendant. So where it goes shows you what happens, what's likely to happen with the career and the performance. Bang! 8th house. 8th house, as I said before, also deals with addictions. Yeah, addictions, compulsive behavior, those kind of more deeper, darker, even kinkier parts of ourselves that we necessarily don't want to talk about. But we can also make a very, very deep and profound bond in the 8th house, particularly as well if we've got the Dharakaka in there. But what it does also show as well, it shows that the spouse, remember Pluto is in the 7th with Mercury, showing the communication qualities of the spouse, you know, those flavors of Bobby Brown with the rebel, but he is literally represented by Mars and he's in the 8th, and we know what happened with their addiction. They literally fueled each other. I don't know if you guys can remember, but many people might not know this one, but do you remember when Whitney Houston was on Oprah Winfrey and she was talking about how crack is whack? Do you remember that? And she was out of it. Bless her. You know, this is very challenging. So we can see in Bobby Brown, she found her partner in crime. And what's very interesting from what I understand with interviews that I've either read or, you know, seen, what Bobby said, he said, you know what? She was the party girl. 5th house. He liked his drugs. He dabbled a bit, but he said when he was with Whitney, it really just exploded. And he was telling the truth. He's telling the truth. They both brought that out of each other. Mars is energy. Mars is a planet of power. It's of passion. So we could see, for example, in Celine Dion's chart where she was wearing that red dress with her whole thigh, you know, slashed up to the thigh and whatever. Mars is not so much about the face, but it's very much about the body, and it's very much about the energy. And it has that athlete kind of quality. And these qualities are great when Mars is working for you. In Celine's chart, she's got Mars in the 10th. One of the best places to have a malefic like Mars gives you great energy and drive for your career. But what happens when Mars is in the 8th? In the house of addiction, in the house of sudden changes, scandals. You know, not so good, is it? Because Mars is going to be there powering that up, powering those addictions. And we can see, so we can imagine as well, that's Bobby Brown in there as well. It's not his fault, you know, this is just energy, this is fate, this is destiny in many ways. And these are challenges that we have to try and overcome. But this is part of what makes the 8th house so difficult. Not only that as well, Mars is in Virgo, and Mercury and Mars are enemies, and Mars doesn't do very well in the signs of Mercury, and vice versa for Mercury. Mercury doesn't do so well in the signs of Mars, because what happens is that if you think Virgo is the sign of what? It's the sign of health, yeah? It's the sign of details, trying to get things right. But it can also be the sign of ill health, health issues. So imagine for an Aquarius ascendant, pardon me, planet Mercury is actually really quite a difficult planet because it rules the 8th house, but it does rule the 5th, but you know, it rules the 8th house. So by Mars, the 10th and 3rd Lord, being in the 8th, in the sign of Virgo, the sign of health, he's going to behave in a more malefic way. So we can see it, because some people, you know, they take their drugs and they do whatever and it doesn't affect them too much. You know, it's not a good idea anyway, but they are somehow still able to be functioning, yeah? A functioning addict, shall we say. For Whitney, no, not good. Because Mars didn't have the strength. It's already in the 8th house, but being in Virgo, it doesn't have, it's weakened. And what would happen is that the mind, that the addictions would just keep plaguing her. Even when she would go to her sleep, she probably struggled, you know, like with her sleep, and we'll explore that in the 12th house. But it was very, very difficult for her to leave that behind, because Mars was giving it that energy. She was always thinking about it. And then you would have Bobby that would be there as well doing his bits. He would, you know, probably try and get clean, and then wasn't able to. And, you know, and they both probably kept pulling each other back into this hole. But there is more. Here, and this is, sorry as well, Mars is in the sign of Hasta, which is to do with the hands and manipulating things. So their hands were busy. And there's that funny saying, remember, idle hands are the devil's work. Boom, that's pretty much that. But there's more. Now, what we do need to discuss here as well, before we finish on a upper, we need to talk about Bobby Christina, Whitney and Bobby Brown's daughter. Now, we know that she had her struggle as well, and I think she passed away, sadly, drugs as well, but I think she was in a coma, and I think she either passed or they switched the machine off, but she was in a coma for a long time and passed, actually, I think around a similar time as Whitney. Now, this is also in the chart, and this is where the astrology really is quite touching, really, and you see how these things plan out, because this little symbol here represents an asteroid called Ceres. Now, Ceres is actually slightly larger than Pluto, so it has the dignity of planetoid, but technically probably should be called a planet. However, I don't think it's as spherical as let me love a slurp. Oh my god, that's so nice. Not as spherical, I don't think, but nonetheless it has influence. Now, Ceres represents, is the Roman answer to Demeter, the goddess of the earth. She represents the mother principle, the homing principle, nesting, protection. But it can also represent our children, but it can also represent, just weirdly enough, abduction. Why? Because the daughter of Demeter was Persephone, and Persephone was taken by Pluto, snatched from the field, taken into the underground, into the underworld. Demeter was distraught looking for her daughter, and winter basically fell and no crops would grow. Eventually, the gods and Pluto reached an arrangement, and Persephone was allowed to stay for 6 months, half of the year, with her daughter. And that represented spring and summer. But come the autumn, she had to go back underground to stay with Hades, Pluto. And that's when Demeter would weep, and then we would start going into autumn and winter. So it also represents one's children, but also as well sometimes some of the dodgy stuff that can happen with children as well. And so in many ways, this is Bobby Christina in the 8th house, also struggling with addictions. Now, I've mentioned Neptune before. Neptune is a wonderful planet, yeah? Planet of spirituality, unity, gives great talent. And for Whitney, it's in the 9th house. Wow, that is amazing. It shows that there was this tremendous spiritual quality in terms of her spiritual beliefs. You know, she was very into God, as we know, talked about that all the time, all of her faith, of course, sang in church, the background of the church, bang. We can see that she had that full support. But if you also see here, there is a malefic aspect from Saturn and a malefic aspect from Rahu. So this 9th house is not quite what it seems. And Neptune is also the planet of drugs, gases, narcotics, liquids, alcohol, you know, and depending on how well placed Mercury is, Neptune is, it can show how we deal with those things in our lives, particularly how we deal with drugs and alcohol. For example, in the UK charts, Neptune is in the 2nd house. Because Neptune, the 2nd house also represents the face, not only what we say, but what we consume. Yeah. So yes, it gives those great spiritual qualities that Whitney had, and of course further uplifted her voice, etc. However, when you do Bhava Chalita and you look at the house cusps, guess where Neptune moves? Bang! Into the 8th house. Now, this for me, more than anything, explains probably why Whitney didn't make it. Because when you have planet Neptune, which is already a nebulous planet, prone to mysteries and lies and deceits and addictions and hidden stuff, yeah, for all of its virtues, which are wonderful as well. I don't want to be too down on any of the planets. But when you've got Neptune in the 8th, with Mars in the 8th and Ceres also in the 8th, in Virgo, you know, dealing with health and blah, 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 all that stuff, I think it was just too much. And I think also as well, which is particularly poignant, because Neptune also deals with liquids, as I said before, because Neptune is what? The Greek name for Poseidon, you know, who is the god of what? The god of the seas. And what he does is, Neptune is also known for earthquakes, because he used to throw his trident into the sea, shake the earth and cause what? Tsunamis, tidal waves, etc. And we could actually have some stuff in terms of going on in the world with earthquakes and such, but I digress. But the point is, remember what I said about liquids. And remember what the 8th house is. It's also death and transformation and sudden shocks and surprises. What happened with Whitney? 8th house. It was a shock to the world. Even though we knew she had her struggles, there was too much what? Alcohol. And there may have even been like a drugs overdose. I think that's what they said. And I think it was heroin. Now, what is important about that? I might need to check my facts on that, but I think it was heroin. But if so, Neptune still rules drugs anyway. But if it was heroin, I must double check, and I'll put it up in the notes. If it is, that's also liquid, yeah? But how does she pass? She passed in the bath. She sank into the bath. Liquids. Out of so many planets, when you analyze certain charts, and this is said by a lot of really good, astrologers, just a shout out to, like Joni Patry and Kapil Raj. But Joni Patry, in her study, brilliant astrologer, hair bigger than Texas, I put a little link down in there. But Neptune tends to make people pass away. It's the great dissolver. And there's always an element of mystery around someone's passing. So if we think of Kobe Bryant recently, Neptune went over a specific part of his chart, and that helicopter crashed in what? Fog. So here we can see liquids played a big part in, quite literally, in Whitney Houston's demise. If we go to the 12th house, we see here now the 12th house is also a house, a very spiritual house, but it's also known as the house of losses. But it's also the house of sleep and bed pleasures, etc. But it can also deal with addiction as well. And what do we see here? It's in the 12th house. And it's also the Atmakaka, the soul planet. And it's aspecting that Neptune, adding to the loss qualities of Neptune. It's not boosting it up. And Rahu is also adding that unexpected dramatic element. So that's two malefics aspecting that Neptune, and Saturn is doing it from the house of loss. And then it's also as well aspecting the 2nd house, which again is to do with the face, but also the mouth, what we consume, but also the emotions. When you have Saturn aspecting the moon, it causes a lot of stress and problems with the emotions, because one can feel down, one can feel lonely. And we know, for example, that Whitney, irrespective of people's opinions, she couldn't be her true self. Let's put it that way. Her female relationships were very important to her, and that's also indicated by Moon in Pisces, by the way. Particularly for women when it comes to a same-sex situation, and we know that was part of Whitney's life. But we can also see with that aspect from Saturn, she didn't feel like she could be herself, because Saturn is what? The planet of restriction. It puts barriers around. I mean, it gives us grace and transcendence and many positive stuff as well. But wherever Saturn looks, we tend to feel restriction in that part of life. Saturn is also looking at the 6th house there. So when we see the daily work and the career, but it's aspecting the sun, which is also to do with the energy of the soul. So we can see both of Whitney's, even though Whitney's moon is actually quite full, it's waning, but it's still quite a full moon. So it had a good awareness, but it was being aspected by Saturn, and the sun is also being aspected by Saturn from the 12th house of loss, where it's also aspecting Neptune. So it's adding even more loss to what it touches, to what it looks like. So I hope this, has helped you understand what Whitney's challenges were, because she had her demons. We know that, but no one is perfect. And you know what? If she did make it, if she did pull through, one thing we do know, the virtue of the 8th house is this transformative quality. Think of the beauty of Whitney's voice, and how it transformed the music industry, how she transformed people's careers. I always say, for me, the apotheosis of America, the absolute peak of the United States, was when Whitney sung the Star Spangled.
That unforgettable moment when Whitney Houston's voice moved a nation. Our country was just 10 days into the first Gulf War, a nation on edge, even on a night when football is our escape. Super Bowl 1991, and one voice united us all. 750 million watching worldwide, but it was the end of that anthem that brought us to all these years later. And in a sign of the enduring power of Whitney Houston's voice, we were on iTunes today, and we noted that her album is the top album in iTunes, and I Will Always Love You is the top song being purchased on iTunes. People thinking of Whitney Houston tonight.
That was it. That was the absolute orgasm of America, and I think it's been a come down ever since. But, that's a little, maybe that's a little bit harsh. But given I've done my, my Trump mini-series, looking at his stuff, then, maybe you can't blame me for saying that. All is not lost, but, you know what I mean. You know what I mean. Anyway, so just to wrap up, so we can see those challenges in Whitney Houston's chart. We can see those demons that she had in the 8th house of Neptune contributing, and the aspects of Saturn, but at the same time as well, what a legacy. The 8th house, the 12th house is also a house of legacy. So people who have a planet in the 12th house tend to leave some kind of legacy behind. And when it's Saturn, it means you'll always be remembered. No one's ever going to forget Whitney Houston. Her voice and her music will always be appreciated. I hope you I hope you enjoy the clip that I've selected, that I'm gonna have as her play out. So let's look at the positives. She was a great woman, gifted, supernatural talent, as we all know. And just to wrap up, if you've liked that, please subscribe to my channel. Give me the thumbs up. Oh, and don't forget to press the bell icon as well. Please press that. Because it will it helps with all the algorithms and all that stuff, but it also will let you know when my next video is up. My next video is going to be Mariah Carey. Way. My goodness, we know about her. That is a very fun chart, and you can see all the kookiness and the cray of Mariah in there, and of course the colossal talent as well. When we do her chart, you're just going to be like, of course, how could it be any other way? So Mariah is next. I hope you've enjoyed that. If you'd like a consultation with me and you want to know where the talent is in your chart or other stuff, love, romance, money, etc., then please feel free to visit my website, which is thearchetypalblueprint.com. I normally put it over my head somewhere. So hit me up on there. And please share as well, and please comment when you see this video. Who would you like me to do next after Mariah Carey? Please put in your requests. I'll be going through and doing a few because I think this is a rich vein, rich topic. Love doing this, finding out all that stuff, and particularly looking at artists' lives and how things have gone. So if there's anyone you're curious about, put them in. And yep, I hope you really enjoyed watching that one. Whitney is next, so rest in peace, Whitney. It's a little toast for you. You'll never be forgotten, okay? Enjoy, folks, and I'm gonna finish my drink.
Once again, boy, we can take the night. Living on feelings, touching you, I feel it all again. Didn't we almost have it all? there.